During worship, I heard there's a mighty wind roaring through the east gate. Not just through the east gate, but to the east gate. And before I start a year, Josh, to start your church, call it East Gate, to show up every week, when your heart's for the nations, but to show up here regionally, week in and week out, we did the same thing a year and a half ago, and it's a little different. So you and Corral, we bless you for that. And a lot of you were with us last night. I don't know who was with us last night, but we had an amazing time. So I have to say thank you. I woke up this morning. Well, what happened? We had a great time. We had about 100 people, I think, maybe close to 100 people. But when I left, normally when something like that, we had tables, and I told Marcus, I said, Marcus, he said, what can we do for you? I said, well, just put the tables in the closet over there, and then Connor and I'll come back, because we were tired. We'd been going for a good while. It was probably 10 o'clock by that time already. And I said, put the tables in the closet, and Connor and I will come back tomorrow, and we'll sort the chairs out. And I went off and did something and got sidetracked with somebody, and I came back about 10 minutes later, and the whole sanctuary, the whole fellowship hall was exactly like it was when I had gotten there at 3 o'clock. This team had come in there, and I woke up this morning, over the whole night, just what you guys brought to us was overwhelmed by seeing the power of God demonstrated through honor and hospitality, okay? And the foot washing. So I was telling Jeannie's mom and her this morning, because I really was overwhelmed by that. I was overwhelmed by what I had seen demonstrated, not by laying on of hands. We had seen powerful prophetic ministry, powerful. I've got testimonies all day, people texting me, relationships restored that were on the skids, restored last night. People with hope that needed hope, people that needed encouragement through the prophetic ministry, the power of that, the power of worship, the power that came with it. But what struck me was the power of you guys coming in and doing all the people that were doing the little things, the small things, and then left it like you'd never even been there. And I was overwhelmed, so I told Jeannie's mom I was talking about that this morning. And then Jeannie's mom loves for me to just sit around and talk about the Bible, so I did. I went to John 13, and I said, well, Jesus did all this powerful acts and all the demonstrations of power, but the last thing he did, when he said, here's an example of me. And he took off his clothes and started washing feet. So I love that came up, because that's what I'm getting to, okay? That's what I'm getting to for this house. I believe I'm here to tell a story. I am here to tell a story. I'm not really here to teach tonight, I don't believe, a lot. I'm here to tell a story that happened with Jeannie and I a few years back. It's my story. It's become your story. But I had to thank you for that. And part of that story is that this is going to be a servant leadership movement, Joshua. It really is. And it's where the power is. We were at most of these events there. Not, that Muscle Shoals picture of us had nothing to do with anything here. But thank you for honoring us and putting it up there. It was on Telegram, and I figured out how to use Telegram now, so that's good. We're in a defining moment. I believe we're in a defining moment this weekend. Tyler said, I'm still trying to interpret what happened last night, and I am too. But a lot of that, Tyler, I believe, has to do with the way you guys have, the training it was obvious that you guys have been trained in honor, okay? It wasn't just happenstance, and it wasn't just kindness. It was like a well-oiled machine. Humble and efficient, okay? So I'm here to tell a story. Jeannie, March of 2020, I was on a call with 8 pastors, part of an advisory board, 8 local pastors here in town. And COVID was really it was on the horizon, but it really wasn't much of anything at that point. It was early March of 2020. And I started prophesying, which was not necessarily the best thing, because some of those pastors really were not too thrilled about, the gift of prophecy. But it came on me at that time, and I did. And I said, God is moving, and I'm going to be speaking to some of you, and I'm speaking. And I believe it has to do with what is taking place here at the East Gate. God is moving ministers and ministries He's taking them out of what was good and moving them to what was God. And then it just kind of went, it flowed in that vein. He's moving ministers and ministries. He may be moving you just from church to church. He may be moving you from location to location. But in March of 20, he's moving ministers and ministries. And then in December of 21, I was sitting outside a porch of Jeannie and I had moved into a group home with 7 young adults with severe autism for a couple years. And to be spiritual parents and just bring healing and grace and prayer to those folks and the whole community, actually. And I was sitting out on the porch one morning drinking coffee early, and I don't get a lot of visions, but I saw a horn of oil coming out of heaven, and the Lord said, "Get where I've told you to get. Go where I've called you, where I've gifted you and called you to go." This is December of 20, so March of 20. Said, "Get where I've called you to go, where I've gifted you to go, and when you get there, it won't be a double portion, but a quadruple portion. Get where," and it was literally a wide awake vision, and it's been a long time. So Jeannie and I started making plans right then to get to where we needed to go. It was that profound. I believe a lot of you have in those years from March of 2020, are ministers that have moved somehow, somewhere, and you have also gotten to where you need to go. Okay, and I'm just going to confirm I think I'm here for encouragement mostly tonight. So if you're those, if I'm speaking directly to you, okay, if I'm speaking directly to you, and if I'm not, it's okay too, but if I'm speaking directly to you, then you are in line for not just a double portion, but a quadruple anointing in this. So, September, when you guys started, we were at your first meeting, but when you guys, Jeannie and I was told in March of 20, around that same time, it was a busy month for me. COVID hit, and I don't know about you guys, but when COVID hit, we're all kind of staying home, or if you're a little bit disobedient like me, you're sort of staying home and sort of not. But but we had nothing to do, so I had washed the car 5 times. I'd mowed the yard till it was like bald, and washed the dog. I was looking for things to do, and I'm a bit of a doer. And one morning I was sitting there, and I felt like the Lord said, He said, "Would you just stop being productive? You don't have to be productive. Just be present." And then He took me on a journey of what it meant to be present, which we've been on a long time, but I mean a really intense journey on the difference between productivity and production and presence. During that time, He said, the prince of the power of the air started making a lot of noise during COVID. See, I'm in the right place, because after you guys, some of my weirdness is nothing, you know what I mean? It really is. I was sitting there thinking, I'm going to tell a story of these prophetic acts and how I got here and how I got connected with Joshua and you guys. And then I was watching you, I was listening to that, and I said, I'm safe, man. I'm conservative. I may be the only sane one here. And so March of 20, the Lord said, the prince of the power of the air is really getting too much attention. I want you and Jeannie to go put up a sound for me at the easternmost part of Jacksonville, the East Gate, which is down Highway 90. It's a little courtyard called the Seawalk Hotel. It's a mission called Beaches Rescue and Recovery Mission. I've been teaching out there for a number of years at that time, and put up a sound. So every Friday night we would go, just Jeannie and I and Connor, and there'd be nobody there but us and the Lord, and we just worshiped for hours, putting up a sound. And as we did that, we remembered a dream that a friend of mine had. Now Jeannie's from here. She's from here. Is this too loud? I'm sorry, I have a pretty loud voice anyway. But Jeannie's from here, and we moved here for various reasons 10 or 11 years ago. But we didn't really move here for ministry. We kind of moved here away from ministry, and found more. But at that time, a friend of ours, Ray Hughes, had a dream in 1998 that it was on the Elijah list, and we familiar with it, but I really hadn't paid attention to it at that time. We would a little later, and we would refer to this because it has to do with this area. And I'm going to make this pretty quick. In June, this is Ray Hughes. He's a prophet to the nations. He's impacted worship in this country and internationally. Every worship movement in the country, prophetic worship, he teaches on sound. And in June of 1998, Ray Hughes, the Lord gave me a dream about the prophetic wind coming upon the Florida Panhandle cities. He gave visual grit and reality to the aggressive nature the Lord is desiring for his church. The days of passive resistance to the enemy's attacks are over. For God, whether we are with him or not, will restore the warrior spirit to his bride. And in the dream, I saw a fleet of warships coming in from the Atlantic Ocean into the Florida Panhandle. So right here, I saw a fleet of ships coming in from the Atlantic Ocean into the Florida Panhandle. The ships were rugged as if they had each been through too many battles to remember. I believe, I've thought a lot about this one, and I believe those were, it speaks to the apostolic that's just been beaten up by the church for many, many years. That's going to manifest in this area, but I could be wrong. These days, what I'm learning as I try to interpret things, Tyler, is I'm being obedient, and then I'll understand later, because it's just too crazy. So what I noticed more, however, were the men inside the ships. These were huge Viking-like warriors. They were not pretty by anyone's definition, but were as ugly and rugged as a man can come. They approached. I heard a sound coming from these warriors, something like a war cry. The warriors didn't look or sound like anything we've seen before. Their sound was nothing like what has become palatable in our charismatic worship services, or anything that has been accepted as Christian music for that matter. Their sound was rugged and raw, a sound of violence. It was a sound of warriors determined to take the land by force. And there's more of this, but so with that dream in hand, as we started putting up a sound in March of 2020, which we did at the beach, we were very much putting it up, wondering if it was part of that. And we think of if you've done that, and Jeannie would say maybe it's Connor's people. In other words, maybe it's the people we were in the group home, right? Maybe they're the ones that describes, and maybe it's this. So in October of 20, it took a while because you couldn't gather. In October 20, we had a huge. So while we're doing that, though, which is what's so wonderful when you are obedient and do what you're doing. We were sitting there one Friday night, and this was I don't know how many in, and I'm here, and we've got a friend of ours playing the cajon. That's that square box you sit on and play. And Jeannie's singing, and all of a sudden I hear this beautiful tenor voice singing, "Let it rain, let it rain." And I'm like, that's not Jeannie, that's not Bowen. I know it's not me. I don't really have a beautiful tenor voice. I have a passable baritone. But it was Connor. And he sang the whole time, and he sang for 2 months. He sang so consistently for 2 months, we took him to a church that Jeannie's parents were at that had been praying for him for years, had him jump up on the platform, and we hit a big A minor chord, let it, and then Connor was there, and he sang over the microphone. And when everybody was social distancing, there was no social distancing that day. So that was what the Lord did during that. So we were wondering, so in October, we had a big blowout at the Seawalk. We had worship, Lori Dresbach, who's now down with Daniel Kalinda, and leading worship, and some other friends came, and we had a big event based on Psalm 24 and coming in on the warriors, because Ray's dream refers to Psalm 24 if you keep going. He says it'll be like Psalm 24 when these warriors when they get to the church. What will the church say? Will they let them in? Who is this King of Glory, or will they hold him off? Okay, so that was the gist of the dream. So Psalm 24, we do this big event on Psalm 24, and we put up a rugged, raw, as raw as I could. That was the instructions: rugged, raw, loud, all of that as a prophetic act. And when it was over, I knew the next morning I woke up, and it had been a wonderful event, but I knew we had missed it. I knew we'd missed it, because I didn't have a lot of satisfaction. And so I called Ray, and I said, he said, how'd it go? Because he was in with this. Of course, we were shut in. And I said, well, it was a wonderful event. We had hundreds of people come through in the middle of COVID, but, I missed it somehow. And all I can think of. We put up the rugged sound, and I got that part of it. But I believe it has to do with lift up your heads, O ye gates, and swing wide, you ancient doors. Okay? And I knew that. And so he emails me the war rules from the intertestamental period, which is the war rules of sons of light versus the sons of darkness, and the war rules where the troops, Hebrew troops, were actually called gates. You know, the gates would be positioned, the gates would go 50 feet far forward at the sound of the shofar. So we were moving along, and I'm going on this, the glory of God to conceal a thing and the honor of kings to search it out type of mission over these ancient, lift up your heads, O ye gates, swing wide, you ancient doors of destiny. On March 4, on September, as you heard me last night, Marshall, who led worship for us last night, we have a little bluegrass band called Songs of Our Fathers that we go guerrilla into Baptist churches and with the Holy Ghost, with a banjo and a mandolin and guitar and beautiful singing that they do. And so we had practiced one September, and he had left, and the Lord encountered me rather strongly. I was on the floor, and I got up and I said, I heard, take the gate to the first coast. Go back to the Seawalk and take the gate to the first coast. And that was September. I texted Marshall. It led to a lot of things, all these confirming things. So we did that on March 4th. March 4th, It just so happened it was on a Saturday, and it couldn't have been any cooler that happened. I was trying not to do it. And March got there, so September, that's a little procrastination, but I didn't really want to do it. And one night I said, honey, what if March 4th were a Saturday? That would be the time we could just get this out of the way. That's how I was thinking about it, being obedient. And I hate to say it, but we need to do this. And I looked over, and sure enough, March 4th was a Saturday. So we did that. And Dr. Bill gave me some wisdom, because people have been taking the gate to this east gate to this first coast for years. People have prayed and poured their life into it, and I'm not saying it's not been effective, but he told me to take the gate, so obviously it needed taken, or I was wrong. Either I was hearing wrong, or it needed taking. So Dr. Bill, theologian and spiritual dad to me, I went to him. I said, we're going to do this event, and I'll speak. I'll put it out here. Ken Malone's going to come. I think we'll have Ken Malone. It all fell together in about 20 days. And Dr. Bill was going to teach on the gates in Nehemiah like only he can, in detail. I said, teach as long as you want. We'll go 6 hours, 7. I don't care. We're teaching and worshiping all of it. We're not going to cut anything short. So we did that, and he said, let's call it restoring the gates, which that was wisdom, because it didn't step on any toes. But he told me to take the gate to the first coast, the east gate. So all this time, all the way back from 2020, this east gate is taking up a lot of my life. And Psalm 24, even though I'm teaching a lot of other things, Psalm 24 is sleeping with me. Especially lift up your heads, O ye gates, and swing wide, you ancient doors of destiny. Well, Connor, our son, types on an iPad. Okay, he's been communicating like that for 8 years, and as nonverbal friends do, I have learned to type with a lot of them, so I type with many nonverbal young adults, and what I found, they have profound access to the spirit realm. Whether that becomes demonic or whether that depends on where they are and who they're around and all those kind of things. But at Halloween, they would literally want to type, and they go into a whole nother place than you and I just on Halloween, because they're sensing all the activity and they're seeing it, and for whatever reason, I don't understand it, but Connor would type, and he would always refer to this thing called the old way. And as we went on, the old way is the spirit realm. And so finally Jeremiah, so I thought Jeremiah 6:16, the old way. I can find Bible for that, Connor, yeah, because he would say it's the place of the saints and the angels. It's where I go to meet God, and he meets me, and if it weren't for the old way, I'd be dead, Dad. He says, but stop looking for another place. It's just eating from the right tree. So in other words, who can ascend the hill of the Lord? Who can ascend the hill of clean hands and a pure heart? So I'm learning about the Old Way. So we name our meeting the Old Way Fellowship. It started April of a year and a half ago. What's that, 23, 22? 23. April of 23, we start the Old Way Fellowship, which you came and honored us at last night. So as soon as we had done March 4th, and I asked the Lord, when I do these things, I just don't want to do an event. And Joshua and I were talking about it. I said, these events have got to become lifestyles. They've got to somehow or another, and I believe this house is graced for that. And I love doing these events when the Lord says do them, we do them. But we have to make them become more than events. And I'm not quite sure I understand what that means, because sometimes we have to gather together, but at the same time, there's got to be some commissioning, there's got to be some instruction going forward. So the March 4th was wonderful. And I asked the Lord what he would do out of it. If I did that, what would he do? And he told me that if we did that, if we took the gate to the First Coast, that there were ministries he had ordained here regionally that would be birthed or revived because of it, okay? So that was March 4th. Then you guys came along, and I'm friends with Tyler. So Tyler looked me up, and we met at the Urban Bean one day, and he was doing his reconnaissance, and we talked. And Tyler's one of those guys, if you're a minister, you just want to recruit him immediately. You do, get him on the membership rolls and put him to, and have him there, because you can send him to me now, then, but seriously, no, in the spirit, the fire on Tyler was obvious, and so we connected at the Urban Bean. I'll just leave it at that, Tyler. And so through him, I'm seeing he makes a post on Facebook about fathers and sons in this new ecclesia called the Eastgate Kingdom Fellowship that will be started. I'm like, the Eastgate Kingdom Fellowship. So on September 21st of 22, is that right, 23? This is 24, yes. September 21st of 23, Joshua had started a 30-day breakdown to where he was documenting his process to starting this ministry. Do you remember that? And that took a lot of courage. At first, I started watching Dr. Joshua. I'm going to call him Dr. Joshua right now. But I started watching Joshua do this, and I thought, is he just overthinking things, maybe? And quite possible. Well, because I do that too. But as I watched him, it takes an incredible amount of humility and vulnerability to do what he did, to bear his process, where he'd been, where he was going, and bear that and say, if you want to come with me, come. But here it is. Here's all of it. Well, just like I knew Tyler in the Spirit, I started knowing this man in the Spirit before we ever met in person. So on September 21st, that would have been your first post. I sent this to Tyler. Now that you have given a name to this movement, Eastgate, it has set in motion what has stirred in the heart of God for this area for years, that the gates would be rebuilt, established, and kept. Many have talked about, prayed about, done many things concerning the gates and the East Gate. All of that important, but there has to be a birth and a naming for destiny to unfold. There has to be a birth and a destiny for a naming, a birth and a naming for destiny to unfold. You've named it. Eastgate Fellowship will be a living gate. It'll be a living gate. I understand this, but God is saying something more than what I understand at this point. When I saw your Facebook post in the name of this ecclesia, I felt the Father's joy, his pride, his approval, all of the emotions of an expecting father. So, and that was September 21st, and it kept following it, and then we would meet. And so in Nehemiah, Dr. Bill taught it, and he teaches it so well. But Nehemiah 3:28 is when the East Gate is when Nehemiah has gone to Jerusalem. He's repairing the gates, and he's going to rebuild the East Gate needs to be repaired. All the gates are being repaired. And just a couple of passages here I want to touch on. Above the horse gate, this is Nehemiah 3, verse 28 and 29. Above the horse gate, each of the priests made repairs in front of his own house. Next to them, Zadok, the son of Immer, made repairs opposite his house, and next to him, Shemaiah, son of Shechaniah, excuse my Hebrew, it's Southern Hebrew. The guard of Shemaiah, son of Shechaniah, the guard of the east gate, made repairs to his house. Okay? So, Zadok made repairs to his house. Zadok means to cleanse, to clear yourself, to see righteousness restored, to make right. Okay? Follow me. This is a little personal. Shemaiah, the son, because this is a father and son movement. So Zadok, what you guys birthed in homes, okay? The repairs you did here in homes to righteousness and to clear self. It also means vindication, Zadok does. There's that element to it also. And Shemaiah, it says Shemaiah made the repairs to the east gate. His name, that's the son, means God heard. So God heard. And then his father, Shechaniah, God heard what you were asking him to do. There were repairs that need to be made. You were making these repairs. You were coming up with the blueprint, I believe, Joshua, and all of you, the blueprint for the East Gate, for this East Gate movement that would come out of the houses for the reformation of the body of Christ in this time. And if this looks a little unlikely, it is. When we did our event in October way back, we had a room full of people, and it was Jim Whitley and I. But Jim Whitley and I were we were doing this thing. And I looked around, and it was a pretty motley group. And I was like, Lord, shouldn't I go get so-and-so and so-and-so? And maybe we know some names, people with names around here. He said, nope, that's the least likely bunch to do anything. And I want it. So we started calling ourselves the least likely. And we're still calling ourselves the least likely. And they're still with us. They were with you guys last night, and I'm just not going to tell you who they are because it wouldn't sound all that good. But Shechaniah was the keeper of the East Gate. And I love this. Shechaniah means one with God, or better, one that's intimate with God. Okay? So Zadok cleared himself, cleared self, cleansed, sought righteousness and vindication. Right? God heard. And now you are going to be tasked with keeping this East Gate through intimacy. Okay? So that's where I want to go with that. And I believe you are, so I've been watching this. So Ned, Mary, Connor, and I, Jeannie came to your first meeting. October, we came. Jeannie goes to no meetings, and she just goes to very few meetings if she's not doing meetings. Connor and I will go to meetings. And she came to the first meeting, very much said, yes, we need to be there, because I'd sent Tyler that text. So it was on our radar. I'm not making light. What you guys have done from the very beginning has been, we've taken very seriously. We came to that meeting. Who was the first meeting? It was the fella from Germany. He was Alex Bench. Yes, he was awesome. So the next morning I got up and I heard the Lord as clear as I've ever heard the Lord. He said, the gate is secure. Okay. I told Jeannie, he said, the gate is secure. Which was really good for me. So then we came. Ned Merriman was here. Raymond was first probably, but Ned Merriman, he prophesied a mountain of the Lord. I just made a couple notes, but because I was getting wrecked with everybody else, but I made a couple notes because I wanted to, I document this process. I'm a process person too. God is a process person. That's why I appreciate what Joshua was doing and what you're doing. And it's going to pay off. When I say pay off, don't rush the process. Trust the process. Don't rush the process, but trust the process. I didn't mean that to happen. When somebody starts talking in rhymes, you better listen. That was Ned Merriman, remember, one that night. He was prophesying in rhyme. And he prophesied the mountain to the east gate, mountain of the Lord, Zion. God's purpose has always been to establish his presence at Zion. Waylon Henderson says it's a womb play, it's a birthing and a womb. House of glory. It'll carry the spirit of the tabernacle of David. It'll carry keys of knowledge. The Lord is releasing keys of intimacy. Shekinah, it means intimacy. So as you remember these things, as you are encouraged, if you ever get discouraged with what you're doing, which can happen, I hope to encourage you a bit. Then Waylon said, the veil is destroyed, the glory no longer veiled. It's powerful. Then Rhema came, and I only wrote one sentence for her, a new wineskin for the old path. Well, that got me. So we're Old Way Fellowship. When we started our meeting, I said it last night, but if you weren't there, we ate. Every Friday we ate, and Jeannie cooked a meal that was a GAPS, which is it's a spiritual battle that we wage that the world will hear more about later, not tonight. And every Friday we would eat, and the Lord told us when we started the meeting, set the table, and I'll bring the people I want to be with you to the table. So that was part of what we did. And then I started hearing all this talk about tables, and I still don't really know what you guys mean by it, so tell me one day. We get together and talk for hours, and we just kind of wobble out. So much revelation coming from this man. And then that sparks revelation, which sparks revelation. And it's been a real pleasure getting to know you, and all of you. And last night was amazing. So Rhema said a new wineskin from the old past. So that old past in Jeremiah 6:16, we named our fellowship after it. And my people, I've taught on this extensively, but old is it's a Hebrew word, olam, okay? It's used 512 times in the Bible. Ancient, old, New Testament, it goes to a word called eons or A-E-I-O-N-S, but it means the same thing. In the Septuagint, it'll all be the same thing, and everlasting. So every time you see it, ancient, old, everlasting, here's what it means. Always, ancient times, anymore, continuance, eternal, for everlasting, hidden or concealed, the vanishing point, time out of mind, past or future. Every gate has two posts. I like to think of it as one gate. Every gate has two pillars, the past and the future. But it means time out of mind, past or future, eternity always, ancient time, anymore, evermore, of old. That wind that's blowing through the east gate is an evermore olam wind. And it doesn't come from the Atlantic Ocean, even though I'm not sure what that is. It's coming straight from the throne of God to here. And it's blowing through the east gate and to the east gate. Beginning of the world and world without end. The theological idea for the Hebrew people of Olam is simply the hidden or concealed presence of God in this world. Okay? So Connor's old way and Olam, so here I am, Rhema, the old past. So this reformation of the church is one where we're going back to the old. The new is going back to the old. So every reformation of the church comes from the desire of when we have strayed from the true path to begin with. So Luther's Reformation, then we've got, and so a new theology comes out, and we have a new way of experiencing God. More importantly than the theology behind it, we have a different way we experience God. And then every time, you could call Azusa Street, you could call the Great Awakenings of the 1800s here in this country, and Wales, 1903. You could call all of those reformations because each one of them reforms the body. And it was interesting. I was thinking about that today because Catholicism still stayed, and we have both of them going. I believe this next reformation has to be and will be one where we truly go back to the old path. And I'll be as bold to say that I believe the key to that is going to be our understanding of this word olam. And the fact that when the lamb that we sang about, when the bloody lamb, died and was resurrected, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. I remember being 4 years old with a little bow tie on at Vacation Bible School in a Baptist church on commencement night, and I was the only one that could read, so they let me recite that. Have everlasting life, okay? Well, in my church, so it's always been relegated to heaven, but it means what I said. The hidden or concealed presence of God. So you've been called to everlasting life. So go through your New Testament. You've been called to everlasting life. It is heaven, yes. We have heaven is what we're called to. But we're called to the hidden or concealed presence of God in this world, running concurrent to this realm. And I believe that understanding is going to be the main key to the reformation of the church. So I want to release that. It's a little bold. I don't know if I've said it quite, but I like you guys. Connor says Jesus is the old way. He's not part of it. And he is. He is the door. He said, I am the door. And so all this time, so my search for swing wide you, and are you following me? I'm okay for a few minutes? I'm about to finish up. Lift up your heads, O you gates, swing wide you ancient doors, swing wide you olam. David had revelation of that realm that he had cultivated in the shepherd's field. So as a young boy, when he took off Goliath's head and he goes outside the gates with Goliath's head, we all think he took it to the king. Well, it was Jerusalem was not an Israeli city at that time. It was a Jebusite city. So David, as a young boy, got Goliath's head outside the east gate in Zion, waving it. And I can just, I'll go extra biblical here, but I can just see in his revelation of Olam, he's seeing Melchizedek at Zion. He's seeing himself. He's seeing the Christ at what would become Golgotha, where he would bury Goliath of Gath's head, Golgotha. So David's seeing all of that. He had revelation into this realm. And then he would come back later, after he was made king. He would go to Hebron for 7 years. He would take his city. He would take his Zion. The Lord would use him to take his Zion, where he wanted to establish his presence forever, and let everything flow out of that. And so he's going to carry, the presence of God has not been in Jerusalem for 2 generations. The Philistines had taken it due to a compromised priesthood, and I'm not going to teach that long, because we're going to I'm just going to encourage you guys. But this house has to do with that, and the Reformation of the church has to do with the revelation of Olam, I believe. And the reason a lot of you have been interested in Psalm 24, overly interested in Psalm 24 for a few years, is not an accident, because the Lord is speaking that, among other things. And you're shaking your head, but the reason he has us there is because we are moving into that old reality that David carried as a type and shadow of the Christ, David, and his heart for Zion and the east gate. So in Psalm 24, what you talk about, he's got the presence back, because it's been sitting at I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, his house for about 70 years, and David is passionate to have the presence of God in the center of Jerusalem, in Zion, in God's city. So he goes to get it. The story, we know how it is. They start to carry it back. He puts together a huge charismatic experience with 30,000 people that he chose. They put it on a cart, because that's how it had come from the Philistines. So that's how the world would do it, put it on a cart. And I do want to just go here for a minute, because along the way, this fellow named Uzzah says Uzzah reached out in 1 Samuel, reaches out his hand to steady the cart. Okay? And we've heard that. So I was teaching that a while back, and it said, and God struck him there for his error. That word error is a Hebrew word shal, S-H-A-L, and it means casual or hasty or irreverent. So God killed Uzzah for being casual, hasty, and irreverent with the presence of God. The presence of God was in this room, strong today. It is strong today. Worship was amazing. Thank you for becoming worship instead of just leading worship. As we become worship instead of leading worship, that's what will happen as we move into that realm. And then what will happen is everyone we encounter moves into that realm. And the world, and it flows out of Zion. So, I'm going to move along a little quicker. Where was I? So, David shook up. Uzzah, who was a friend, is killed for being casual, hasty. David had not inquired of the Lord. So now he goes back, and he does incorporate a lot from the old. He's carrying the Ark of Seven the next time. And Psalm 24 is a song of him carrying the presence of God to the east gate, carrying the presence of God to the east gate to establish the presence of God in the center of culture, in the very center of all culture, arts, education, religion, government, and it will stand there. His tabernacle will stand there for 33 years as a shadow, type and shadow of the Christ, whose tabernacle would come here 1,000 years, 900 years later, and stay with us for 33 years. And then James says in Acts, and they're talking about Gentiles and Jews coming together and the one new man, and that's true. You can exegete it that way, absolutely. But James says, in these last days, I will rebuild the house tabernacle of David. So I'm going to wrap it up, Josh. I'm not going to teach on what I talked about last night. I will just for a minute. When they're getting ready to move the ark the second time successfully, David has a fellow named Chenaniah, and it says, and they've got all the Levites together now, and they're still going to worship their way they're going to worship their way to Jerusalem. And Chenaniah, it says in 1 Chronicles 19, Chenaniah taught the song because he was skillful in the song, S-O-N-G. Okay, Chenaniah taught the song because he was skillful in the song. That word song is a word massa, M-A-S-S-A, a Hebrew word, and it has nothing to do with music. It means a burden, a heavy weight, a porterage with singing. So what Chenaniah taught them, Asaph would come along to the tabernacle and he would teach them the scales or whatever, the singing part, but what Chenaniah was teaching them to carry the presence of God was how to get their hearts postured, how to carry this, and it intimates doom. The fear of the Lord is built into that word. Chenaniah taught these priests the fear of the Lord, the heavy weight, the porter is the burden. I saw that in Amanda tonight. I saw that breaking through. And when that breaks through, I believe it's a burden of intercession. Joshua, you said this house is a house of intercession. I believe it. I believe that is Massa. So David builds his tabernacle and establishes worship, and we know that. And for 33 years, no enemy attacks Jerusalem for 33 years while the tabernacle of David was established, okay? So Chenaniah has taught the song, okay, because he was skillful in it. He's taught them how to carry Massa, that burden, that porterage, that heavy weight, with an utterance of doom. He's teaching the fear of the Lord because Uzzah didn't have it. Uzzah got casual. Okay, are you following me? Uzzah got casual, so these people need to know to carry the presence of God. So further back, David had I don't need to go there. So, which is really, I believe this house is going to carry that kind of. I believe that's where the songs of deliverance are going to come from. David talked about songs of deliverance, and he knew songs of deliverance because he had run from Saul earlier when he wasn't even a king yet. He had run from Saul, if you remember that, and if you don't, forgive me, but he had run from Saul, and he ran to Naot Ramah to Samuel and where the prophets were, and then Saul sent killers, right? It says the prophets came down the hill prophesying, and then the killers started prophesying, right? He sent more killers. They come down, they prophesy, in the Spirit of God, it says. They're all prophesying in the Spirit of God. Happens 3 times, and then Saul comes, and the same thing happens to him. And that word prophesied, they didn't sit and tell each other the future. What it means is the word nabi, and it's an ecstatic song of divine utterance. So these prophets are carrying an ecstatic song. So the people, Kenaniah, the people that established David's tabernacle were trained. Here's where I want to go with that. Were trained to carry an ecstatic song of divine utterance, the heavy burden weight of the Lord of intercession that was so powerful it changed atmospheres to where killers were not only rendered ineffective, but they started doing the same thing. Yep. You didn't even have to go through the sinner's prayer with them. You didn't. There was no sinner's prayer, just, I'm carrying this and I'm walking in. And I believe this house can train up prophets and musicians to do that, okay? I believe this house, so I'm just going to read a little bit. The Reformation that this house is a part of will be driven by the song, the Massa of the Lord, the intercessory burden and weight, carrying songs of deliverance. You will create lyric and language for generations, just like David's tabernacle. I don't do this very often, okay? I don't just run around making houses feel good. Our connection to the East Gate is supernatural, and we don't even know what's going on. But last night showed it. We went to Tyler's and led worship. Tyler asked Jeannie and I to lead worship at his house for his first home meeting, and the glory of God came into the house. God said yes. God was saying yes. Okay. Driven by song, carrying songs of deliverance, you'll create lyric and language for generations, much like David's tabernacle. The reformation of the church will at its heart be a people who carry the full knowledge of who we are as sons and daughters, carrying the presence of God into all areas of society. The mysteries of Olam are going to be unveiled. Who is this King of glory? Swing wide, you ancient doors. Swing wide, Olam. So I'm convinced the keys of David from Isaiah 22:22, the keys of David, and I've not heard anybody say this, but I'm convinced it's what Connor has. The ability to access, and what many of you have, to access that realm. I believe that's the key David had. And now we have it. Jesus gave it to us because all authority has been given to us. We've been called to everlasting life. He died so that we could have what? Everlasting life. All of these scriptures are not heaven. We were called to be able to do that. Okay. You'll steward. So you named it Eastgate. So there's destiny in name. You will steward this gate as watchmen, not with charismatic pretension, but with wisdom, accountability, and love. This will be a house of mercy. The East Gate is the mercy gate. It's beautiful, gate beautiful, but it's also the mercy gate. And this is a house of deliverance, so songs of deliverance, but it's a house of healing and deliverance. And there's a carrying. We have to have a carrying behind our callings. And the carrying behind deliverance is mercy. Okay? Should be. It's mercy that wants to see people healed, delivered, whole. Period. I believe there's a grace and a maturity in this body and in you, Joshua, to pioneer that which has been and will be. I believe the East Gate and all that it represents will be a vital part of reforming the ecclesia in the nations. You operate in the knowledge of the Word of God. You're experienced. That's going to be vital that we are grounded and rooted in the Word of God. As we access those realms and operate in those realms, that we're not flaky. That's the only way I know how to say it. That we lose the flaky. We walk in armed and dangerous, and also knowing what we carry, and that we create those atmospheres. And you can know that. You can hit one note on a guitar if you know that, and watch the room change. You can sing one note if you know that and see the room change. You can say one word of compassion and watch the room change. So it's going to be vital, the knowledge of the Word of God, and that's what I've been very impressed as I've gotten to know Joshua, and we are getting to know each other better. You understand honor, which is the foot washing.